We'll give it just a few more minutes to let other people join. While we're waiting, does anyone have any burning questions or anything to share relevant for their experience? Any clarification questions about taking the final test, about the Cloud Practitioner modules, anything there at all?
How bad a shape are we in if we're still 3 weeks behind in this class?
You mean you still haven't done any of those things?
I've been just buried.
Yeah, I understand.
So this isn't going to go away after class. We're still, I mean, after this program's over with, we're still going to have access to the links, and we're still going to, I'll still be able to email you with a question if I have a question.
I'll still respond to you if you post in Basecamp even. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Yeah,
I appreciate
absolutely.
that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, we're just going to disappear like smoke, right? Yeah, I know the pacing doesn't match everybody's schedule. So
appreciate it.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay, so other than concerns about pacing, anybody else have any questions? How are we doing this week with the let's see, we were finishing out the module, and I think people were starting to take the review mode section of the exams, right? That was the certification guide recommendation. Actually, take it a look now. Yeah, there we go.
I have one more question.
Yes, please go right ahead.
So I just found out that there are 2 people that are not in this class, and they've been asked by their manager why they're not in this class. If someone has never had the opportunity to sign up, can they still at least get access to the resources or something?
I mean, I think that's a discussion with Jana and or Victoria. I'm fine with it.
I'll tell them to contact Jana.
Yeah,
that's fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
thank you.
Just FYI, there is going to be another session. I haven't quite gotten it coordinated yet, but there will be another one starting probably the end of August. Or beginning of September. That's the goal or plan, let's say. But yeah, there's an effort that there will be another set of sessions available later as well.
Awesome.
But yes, please do feel free to connect anyone with me that would like to jump in on this.
I will. Thank you so much. I'll let them know right
You're
away.
You're welcome. Not a problem.
Yeah, there you go. Just write things down. Okay. Good. That's it. That's gold. All right. Any other lingering questions this week? Obviously, we are in week 3 as we talked about. So this is the what? No, actually, we're not. Yeah, let's see. Block 2, block 3. Actually, we're in block 4. So this is the week of the 19th through the 23rd. So ideally, you're finished with all the modules, and I saw a bunch of feedback in Basecamp that showed that people were, which is awesome. If you're not, go ahead and finish the modules and start working on a review mode test, one of the practice exams inside of Tutorials Dojo. If you want to add some of the labs, they're listed in Basecamp if you need to like reinforce something. But tonight we're gonna walk through some of the practice exam questions in the review mode section to kind of highlight ways of thinking about how these answers work, what Amazon's looking for, just various pieces like that. Anyone have anything else to cover before we switched over to that?
Could you show real quick where the labs are, because the hyperlink in the spreadsheet didn't work?
Oh, the hands-on labs are listed in Basecamp. So they're under Docs and Files. So if you're actually in the Basecamp, you can actually click on Docs and Files, and the additional study material, I believe, is.
Got it. Yeah. Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So if you're here and you've already clicked on, let's say, the web-based exam practice labs, right? That would take you straight into Tutorials Dojo, and you would basically end up looking something like this. And then it would ask you to sign in. So I'm going to sign in. And then once you sign in, you're actually, you should have, I'm just going to show basically all the ones that I have access to. Hold on just one second. Let me switch down to Cloud Practitioner. So here it'll show the certified cloud practitioner kind of like home base, including anything that you've been doing or in the middle of. The main thing around course content, which I know that's a little bit of an eye chart, so I'll bring that up, is that you're really not going to touch the time mode exams. The main reason for that is you can't actually check the right answer while you're taking it. It is a good practice, but preferably what you would do is you actually take the review mode exams. There's 5 of those, and all you're really going to do is pick 2 that you really like, that are going to make sense to you. So you want to pick 1 and 4, that's fine, 2 or 5, and you're going to stick with those 2. If you want to add a third, that's fine too, but 2 is usually a recommendation. So let's say in this case, we actually pick review mode set 3. So I'm going to take the third test for our purposes today. And we just start the quiz. And what will happen is that it'll roll over. And I'm not sure why it's doing that. I haven't seen that before, actually. I haven't seen that view, but we'll blow it up. And what will happen is it'll just start asking you questions. So let's run through this and get some practice. And as we do this, I'll actually talk about what's behind this thought process. And it's going to seem a little random because it's covering a broad swath of services. But while it is kind of random, the intention here is that, especially if you finish the modules, it's meant to kind of reinforce where you either didn't see the detail or you did see the detail, and to kind of just strengthen your brain and the total body of knowledge related to cloud practitioner. So for example, which of the following is needed to retrieve a list of your EC2 instances using the AWS CLI? Is it a username and password? Is it MFA, multi-factor authentication, an SSH key pair, or is it access keys? Now, if you want to go ahead and type your answer in the chat, I usually use the 1, 2, 3, 4. You can put your number down, right? But I usually also walk through what I know about the other answers, right? So MFA is definitely off the table because multi-factor authentication, while part of a login process, it's probably not the primary thing, right? It's a secondary thing, right? And not that everyone shouldn't be using it, but it's not going to enable them to basically authenticate you, right? At least not by itself, typically. Username and password. We use username and password with AWS mainly to log into the console, not really to programmatically access something through the AWS CLI. Now, this is where like people usually get lost, is that SSH keys and access keys, when they see the word key, they might instantly think, well, key sounds like the right answer. And then, not necessarily pay attention as much to the prefix. Obviously, if you're, especially on the system administration side, you're like, SSH keys are used to log into operating systems. Doesn't sound like something you would use to access an API. So in this actual case, access keys is actually the right answer, because you need an access key and a secret access key in order to actually use the CLI, because it basically provides the equivalent of a username and password, if you will, for anything that's not the console. So what we'll do is, that's the logic, and if we check it, it will then come tell us, hey, this is the right answer. Access keys, secret access keys. And it'll tell you that it's associated with the IAM, and that's where you get them from, and it's associated with the user, because every access and secret access key is associated with the user, not necessarily a real person, but with a user inside of IAM. So access keys. This is interesting. Access keys are a long-term credential for IAM user or the AWS root account. Just to be clear, you should never have access keys on your root account. That's a anti-pattern for AWS. But regardless, this also tells you the same thing I said, which is why the other answers are wrong, right? So the CLI wouldn't use a username and password. MFA is not required when using the CLI, because it's not. And then SSH keys are used to authenticate into an operating system like an EC2 virtual machine. And then there are the links, right? Has, just to show you, if you haven't seen this before, it shows references to the original AWS linkages. And then if you are failing questions consistently about IAM, that's actually great, because then you can actually go to the Tutorial Jojo's cheat sheet and actually just skim IAM to get a refresher about how to use it. Good. All right, I saw, by the way, people put answers like one or access key in there. Okay. We're going to go a little faster now, but we can pause at any time to answer any questions or any thoughts that need to be shared. Which of the following is a continuous delivery service that you should use to automate your release pipelines for fast and reliable application infrastructure updates?
That was in this class?
About the like pipeline services, CI/CD? So Amazon has a series of services called Code something, right? Everything from Code Star to Code Guru, which, you know, are used for different things, but then they have Code Build, Code Pipeline, Code Commit, right? They have others, Code Deploy, right? And they actually do what they like are actually labeled, which is rare for Amazon to actually, not knocking them, just saying they don't always label things intuitively. So Code Commit is actually a Git repository. Code Deploy is used for deploying code, right? And then Code Pipeline is actually a pipeline. So in this case, oddly enough, the name probably matches, right? And that Code Pipeline would probably be the right answer here, right? Data pipeline, data sync, data pipeline. I'm not even sure if the data pipeline is a product, right? Oh, it is. It's actually used for workflow orchestration. Tells you how much I deal with data, right? So Code Commit is for Git repositories. Code Deploy is an agent-based system for deploying code onto operating systems. Okay. So again, if you're like, oh, I didn't really see Code Pipeline before, you might take note that there's a bunch of code services out there. Maybe just take a quick gander, right? And if you want to, I can find the section that has Code Pipeline from the modules, because maybe that's worth highlighting, actually. Okay.
Not that I don't believe you, but I'm sure it was there. I would have guessed that based on the verbiage, but I just don't remember it in the classes from yesterday.
Well, we'll find it. We'll see. We'll dig it up. Okay. All right, let's talk about CloudTrail. What's CloudTrail used for, right? So what we're looking for is, first of all, it would be good to know what CloudTrail is used for, but more importantly, what they're looking for is what statement is true about CloudTrail. One, is it disabled by default for new accounts? Two, does it charge you for every single management event trail that it creates? Three, when you could create a trail, like a cloud trail in the console, it applies to all AWS regions by default. And then four, CloudTrail is able to capture application error logs from your EC2 instances, right? So an interesting statement, because you really actually need to know something about CloudTrail for that to actually work. For example, if you know that by default it doesn't actually capture everything from all regions unless you like make it global, you wouldn't necessarily know that that's not necessarily a true statement, right? But we know, for example, CloudTrail, what it does is it captures all API calls that are made against your account. If you enable it for that, you could actually enable it for specific things. But it doesn't really capture application error logs. That's not really its function, right? That's probably CloudWatch logs is probably what they're talking about. So we know that this fourth one is false, right? But does it apply to all regions by default? Like, does it charge you for every trail created? Is it disabled by default for a new AWS account? Which one is actually true there? So I'm kind of just checking. Let's see, Nick, I think you put 3 in there, right? Anybody else have a guess? I'll go with the guess, right? So there it is, right? Is that it is actually, in this case, when you create a trail, it does actually apply to all AWS regions by default. So AWS CloudTrail is now enabled for default by all customers. So this, by the way, could get a little tricky, because if you have an older account, you notice that, by the way, CloudTrail is not enabled by default. So you'd have to have basically a recent account to know that that first statement is no longer true. But like, these are the kind of things the exam exposes you to, so you can actually learn what the current ins and outs are and what's changed, right? Because just so you know, for the majority of CloudTrail's existence, when you created a new account, it was disabled by default, but now it's enabled, right? You can also specify specific regions, by the way, now with creating a CloudTrail, a trail in the console. know that that's also a change in behavior. So again, it used to be that when you started a trail, it actually didn't gather it for across an entire region, across all the regions by default, and only did one region. So again, some changes, right? This is why we take the practice exams. All right. You are tasked to simplify the database migration of your databases from your on-premise servers to AWS. Which server is best, which service is best suited for migrating databases, right? Now, first of all, just note that obviously Snowball and Snowmobile are basically devices that are used to obviously like sent to you. The truck, by the way, Snowmobile is driven to you. You plug it into your data center, right, in some form or fashion, and then you basically transfer data to it. The Snowmobile is a petabytes large truck. The Snowball is an 80 terabyte, usually 72 terabytes usable device, right? Depends on which version you get. So we're going to take those off because those are not really optimized for databases. They're just used for transferring. Now, the server migration service, I'm going to assume, is actually for servers, and the database migration service is actually for databases. So in this case, even if you didn't know the services, you might just go with something that's explicitly labeled. Only if you knew that DMS was a real service, because sometimes they'll put services on there and they're not real, like Infinidash. So we'll check this one. And then it shows basically, right? So, and then it goes and explains that this is a service dedicated just to database migration, either one time or continual, right? And then, gives you some examples and some diagrams about what's possible. So, yeah. There's a link to DMS if you want to see it. I think the DMS service got notable mention in the Cloud Practitioner modules. I don't think there was a deep dive into it, just that it existed. Okay, which type of EC2 instance is the most suitable and cost effective if the customer will be running mission critical workloads continuously for a whole year? Okay, so just to say this, whenever Amazon starts throwing out adjectives like suitable and cost effective or mission critical workloads continuously, when you see these weird keywords pop up, especially continuously for a whole year, then you want to kind of note those because those are going to be influential against the answer. Now, suitable is obviously very vague. Cost effective is not actually. And mission critical workloads continuously for a whole year, that is a very telling statement. So we're using the EC2 service, which has a variety of licensing types that all showed up in the Cloud Practitioner module. Most of us use on demand, which is the most expensive way. And we have to remember that the cost effective is one of the things that we're looking for, right? Spot is a great option because you can get up to 90% savings on EC2, but it gets interrupted pretty regularly. So that's not going to work very well for continuously. Dedicated is arguably actually the most expensive way to use EC2 instances. And that license type basically puts you on either a dedicated host where you run your own instances, you literally have your own box inside of Amazon's data center, or you have your own dedicated mini box because you're running an instance. And so you're getting a slice of a host that's been, hardware isolated. So with that in mind, reserved instances or reservations against your EC2 instances will give you a 1 or 3 year commitment, and it'll give you, a 66 to 70% discount. So based on the answers that I all see from throwing in through chat, it looks like you all agree that 2 is it. So it does require a unit of licensing types. And so you have them listed here so you can go back through and see. But the key words that cemented this against a reservation is that the main outcome needed to be a cost reduction, cost effective, cost efficient, and that it was a continuously run workload for a whole year. Reservations only come in 1 and 3 year commitment sizes. So if it was 6 months, that probably wouldn't be a reservation. So yeah. Any questions about that? Okay. All right. You have a large number of log files that are going to be archived in AWS for a while, and they should have a retrieval time of 12 hours or less. So let's just stop there for a second. Log files, they use the word archived, and they said the words retrieval time 12 hours. Those are all keywords. Without even looking at the answers, I can already tell you what the answer is, right? Which service is the most cost-effective storage class for this purpose? So inside of S3, right, there's standard, there's infrequent access, there's infrequent access one zone. Let's ignore intelligent tiering for a second. Then there's Glacier and there's Glacier Deep Archive. So which of these is the most effective? Well, the fact that they said archival right away makes it either Glacier or Glacier Deep Archive, right? Now they said they wanted to archive it for a long time and it should have a retrieval time for 12 hours or less. So I see a variety of different answers, but I see more ones than I see threes. So let's see. Is it actually Deep Archive or would it be Glacier? And what's the difference, right? So in this particular case, it is actually Deep Archive. And the main distinction is that Glacier's Deep Archive is the lowest storage class. It's usually 1/20th of the cost of standard S3 storage, right? You keep it there for 180 days. You don't make like paying the access fees. So it really is, in a sense, the best option. Now, Glacier, the reason is that 12-hour retrieval time is actually within the retrieval time that Deep Archive could provide. If it said like, 3 hours or something, you might like lean more towards Glacier, but it is within 12 hours and Deep Archive is the most cost-effective option because remember, the question said, what's the most cost-effective option that meets both requirements, the retrieval time and is the cheapest? So remember, when you look at these questions, you want to key in on what they're trying to squeeze out of you, because ultimately the thing they're prioritizing the most is that does it have a retrieval time of 12 hours and is it the cheapest thing that we can do, which Deep Archive is both. It is the cheapest and it meets the 12-hour retrieval time. The reason I didn't include intelligent tiering in my little thing is that intelligent tiering is actually more of a mode, I think, than a class of storage. Because what it does is it actually moves you to different classes of storage based on your access pattern. So, it does have a pretty flat fee associated with it, but like when it moves you to different classes of storage, it's not really a storage class. It's kind of more of a orchestrator of storage classes somewhere. Okay. Any questions about that? There's a video embedded in here. That's rich. All right, so we're on billing and pricing. Which the following is true about the enhanced technical support response times of the enterprise support plan? So not the business plan, not the is it the developer plan versus the basic plan, right? So there's two, you gotta select two of these pieces. So you got to remember, when was it like 12 hours? When was it 15 minutes? When was it an hour? Like when did the response, what was the key differentiators? Well, this is the highest, most expensive support plan that you can get from AWS. So as you can imagine, it probably covers mission critical workloads, business critical systems pretty strongly, and it covers general production, right after it. So I got to tell you, if I was paying the most expensive thing with AWS, I actually am just going to say that I probably better see a 15-minute response time for my business critical workloads. Just throwing that out there. And then if a 48-hour response time for the highest plan, no way. 12-hour response time, absolutely not. 2 hours, not really, because I've got a 1 hour, so I probably want that one, right? And I see that some of you have answered the same thing, right? I see 2s and 3s out here. So they make a distinction when they do the support plan listing that says that the enterprise plan, you have a 15-minute response for enterprise, like business critical workloads, and a 1 hour response time if anything in production goes down. So we'll check it. There it is. Here, by the way, is the quick guidance around this whole thing. Notice that the enterprise is the only one that has the 15-minute business critical response. Everything else is actually remarkably the same as compared to business. Notice that developer gets basically system impaired, right? 12-hour response time versus a 24-hour general guidance, which is honestly how the rest of everything works. So they do stack on each other. So the real distinction between developer and business is production system impaired versus production system down. The real difference between business and enterprise is the additional of the mission critical, business critical system being down. Okay. Another technology one. You're planning to create point-in-time backups of your Amazon EBS volumes. Which of the following are correct statements? Okay. Let's see, 1 in 5, 1 in 5. I saw 3. Let's see. So we'll go with the consensus. Let's do 1 in 5. Let's check it. Okay. So how's the rest of this work? For the instance doesn't have to be stopped to take an EBS snapshot. You do have to be careful, by the way, if it's writing like to database files or whatnot, you can get some inconsistencies. But again, quiesce the database if it's sensitive to it. Backing up the same EBS volume will create a new backup of the whole volume. It's going to create an incremental actually, with just a change data set. Let's see. You can take EBS backups by creating Amazon machine images. Well, Amazon machine images are actually created out of EBS snapshots. That's what they are. The only difference is that they're just registered as an AMI with EC2. So you wouldn't necessarily like backup a system by creating an AMI. That could be a way of doing it, but not really the recommended method. Really, what happens is that, first of all, EBS backups are actually stored in S3 in kind of a hidden section of S3, which is why they're so cheap to take snapshots. And you can create point-in-time backups through EBS snapshots. That's actually true. So that's just like having to know how the Elastic Block Store actually works. Remember, this is the hard drive service for EC2, so they want you to be able to back up your data, and they want to keep it as cheap as possible while still being able to perform restoration-wise. So here you can see that EBS backup volumes are not called AMIs; they're called snapshots usually. Backing up the same volume because snapshots are incremental, which I already said. You don't actually have to stop EC2 instances to take a backup. Questions about that? Okay. Which AWS support plan includes a concierge support team, which will assist you with your billing and account inquiries and work with you to implement billing and account best practices? I have to say, a concierge team, that sounds pretty swanky, pretty posh, actually. Sounds like a high tier support plan, right? I don't think they could have actually made that sound any swankier unless they added that you get a TAM, actually a dedicated technical account manager, right? So that's definitely going to be some big dollars. Just go ahead, Jenna. What were you going to say?
And a foot rub.
Yeah, I mean, really, right? Just so you know, these plans are typically a percentage of your monthly spend with AWS. Like, they tier it, but it's like 10% at one level and 7% and 5 and 3. So just so you know, it can be a small but yet sizable chunk of your AWS bill. So I'm just going to assume that it's the enterprise plan because it sounds pretty swanky. I knew that a TAM goes to the enterprise. I didn't remember they called it a concierge support team. I usually just refer to it as a support team, but here it is in detail, right? And the thing is the enhanced technical support. So both the access to high-level engineers and the concierge support team up here. Notice that under technical account management, you have a TAM. So at the enterprise level, you not only get the swanky concierge support team, you also get a TAM as well. Okay. That you just need to know, or you could have inferred like that from just the nature of the language. Good. And I saw those answers. Okay, which of the following services allows you to store Docker images and orchestrate Docker containers in a simple and cost-effective manner? I want you to know this is a little bit of a trap. If you go out there and Google 17 ways to run containers on AWS, you'll actually find a blog post by Corey Quinn, who will talk about the 17 ways that you can actually run containers in production on AWS. But Amazon will tell you that there's only actually 3 services that govern containers. So code commit is definitely not one of them officially. Neither is AWS Batch, which has really, I mean, don't get me wrong, it runs containers, but it's not really for that purpose. It runs batch processes using containers. Lambda can run containers, but it's really not, according to Amazon, for that purpose. It'll run Docker, right? Really, the 2 services here that are really focused on containerization actually have it in their names, which in this case is the Elastic Container Registry and the Elastic Container Service. So they have container in the name. They are definitely the intended services. The only thing that would make this confusing is if EKS was here, which is the Kubernetes service, which is running containers as well. So let's see. I saw a mix of 3 and 4, 4 and 5. Thank you for answering, by the way. Let's check and see what they think, right? So these are really the container services. But just to say this, if you answered Lambda or you thought code commit, you're not necessarily wrong. It's just not the Amazon answer, which is that they have container services. And they're actually listed on the console under containers, under a whole separate thing. Lambda's under compute, batch is under compute, that kind of thing. Okay. Next question. You've got multiple AWS accounts in your organization. So immediately, by the way, my brain immediately thinks, okay, what are the tools that can manage multiple accounts? That's the first, like immediately I'm sitting there going, this is what this question is going to be about, right? How can you take advantage of these multiple accounts to save on your monthly costs, right? Now, just to say this, setting a budget for each account sounds like a really logical thing to do, right? But that will just give you awareness of your costs. It won't necessarily save you money. So be mindful of that. Using AWS organizations and enabling consolidated billing. Well, what you do there is that organizations, and of which Control Tower and Landing Zone are just variations of, really, you basically shove your account under one meta account. And by doing that, you can get volume discounts because all your accounts in aggregate are using a higher tier of service than just the single accounts. So I'll give you an example. Let's say the S3 pricing tiers out, meaning the first 10 gigabits, I'm sorry, the first 10 terabytes, let's just throw that out there, costs you, let's say 10 cents a gigabyte. But when you cross the 10 terabyte threshold and you go from 10 to 100, Amazon's like, we love you guys so much because you're using more than 10 terabytes. Instead of paying 10 cents a gigabyte, why don't you pay 8? So if you consolidate all your accounts under one organization with consolidated billing, what ends up happening is that you get volume discounts because your aggregated volume of usage is higher than just what you would get on a single account. So oddly enough, it's a little bit like, by the way, spending money to save money. I don't really like those things, but it is actually true, is that if you have 100, like I walked into a company, they had literally 300 plus accounts, like 384. When we aggregated them together, the bill actually fell. I know that it sounds weird, by the way. They had allowed everyone to just create their own account and then they roped them in later. 384 accounts all roped together, huge consolidated billing discounts. So based on my own experience, that could be a valid way of basically saving on monthly costs, right? Migrate all resources to a central account to take advantage of volume discounts. Well, that's impossible. You can't, migrating things is always a real pain to do, and it's not easy. And I don't know that that would be like the most effective option. Create an IAM group containing all the accounts to enable consolidated billing. That's not even a thing. There are IAM groups, but you can't put accounts in them. So basically, Jenna, that's exactly right. So Jenna said, isn't 3 then just a definition for 2? Yeah, that's correct. Basically, by creating AWS organizations, you're creating an account that contains all the other accounts. So in a sense, 3 is a definition for 2. So sneaky, yes, 100%. So the thing though that will catch most people is that a budget is a reasonable way to create awareness, which would then create lowering costs, right? Is that not reasonable? But remember, we're looking for the most direct answer. And the direct way to immediately save money, if you have that situation, is to consolidate everybody under a single biller account. And then you get volume discounts instantly and you change nothing. Does not affect the running of your system in any way, shape, or form. Questions about any of this? Yeah, that's a good point. No need to migrate. Remember, Amazon is always wanting you to give them the effort and them the work. They also don't recommend third parties. So if you see an answer in here that says, hey, use the third-party billing tool, no, they're not going to support that. If you see an answer that says, hey, manually migrate all of your blah, 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 fill in the blank here, that's not the answer. I can tell you every time, it's not the answer, right? Good point. You wish to host a static website of your own in AWS at a low cost. Which service should be used for this purpose? Just to say this, I don't know until AWS came around that I ever said the words static website or dynamic website. I just said website, and whatever it had on it is what we just figured out how to run, right? But then when AWS came along, they're like, hey, we have a place that you can run static websites. And then I realized that we needed to have like that definition in our lexicon, right? Versus dynamic websites. So you really just need to know this. It's like, where can you run a static website on AWS? And since they're making an emphasis of the fact that it's a static website, it's probably not a virtual machine, right? But they put EC2 on there just to throw you off, because that is where traditionally we do run websites. But the minute you see static website and I see a bunch of people kind of listing it, you're going to use S3 for that. They were so proud of that at the beginning. It's been that way for like 15 years. They're just so proud that you can run a static website in S3. You can offload all of your static stuff, right? I get it, but that's a common pattern. Okay. Billing and pricing. Among the following payment options, which of the following can you choose when you purchase a standard or convertible reserved instance? In other words, what are your options here? Well, I'm pretty sure that bill me later is not a real thing. So we can knock that off. Amazon's pretty bad at naming things, but I don't think they would call it bill me later. We can take that off. Deferred payment? No, there's no way. No one's using that language. That's not happening, right? And that doesn't trigger anything for me, right? Now, reserve payment, partial payment, and all upfront payments, though, even though I can't like snap recall, I'm like, those sound like those could be it. But here's the deal. If it says all upfront or partial upfront or no upfront, because they're trying to make this as clear as possible, this is probably actually the 2 options. And I see that some of you agree, right? So there it is. What this means, by the way, is that when you go to buy a reservation for your EC2 instances, which by the way, can only be done for 1 or 3 years, you're basically saying to Amazon, I am going to pay for a year or 3 years for this virtual machine type, size, family in this particular location. And I know there's variations on that for a year, even if I'm not using it. Amazon will give you a deeper discount if you prepay them for that year or you prepay them for the 3 years. That's called an upfront payment. So the more money you give them, if you give them an all upfront payment, you'll get like a 66, 70% discount off of a 3-year reservation, which means if it costs you $1, right? You can do the math. You pay 30 cents per hour instead of $1 per hour. But that's only if you did a bunch of capital outlay and gave them a large chunk of money. I just say this, some people do that because they think long-term, most people don't. They usually do either partial or no upfront, which isn't listed here as one of the options. But you got to know that upfront payment like statement, those two words together, that should be a trigger word that you're talking about reservations. You're talking about an EC2 licensing type, reservations. Okay. Oh, it looks like maybe I'm wrong now. Maybe we're up to 75% now on a 3-year commitment with a full upfront payment. I'll make sure I don't misquote there. There, by the way, is the standard 1-year term, a convertible 1-year term. Convertible, by the way, means that you can like combine them to t-shirt size them and change them up. And then there's 3-year terms and convertible 3-year terms, right? So, you know, you can see kind of like the savings, right? Versus no upfront versus all upfront. So probably worth looking at when you actually run through this yourself. Okay. Now this is just straight like marketing. This is like pure show business right here, right? What are the following are advantages of cloud computing? It's just so you know, they do actually sneak in like kind of like mindset marketing questions, right? So first of all, let's just acknowledge the fantasy here. Massive discounts for your computers, networking devices, and other equipment from Amazon online shopping website. Now, as a geek, man, I'd love for that to be true, but that's just not true. So we're gonna assume that 3 is not it. I love this. Trade capital expense for variable expense, or trade variable expense for capital expense. Now, anybody who's ever even seen or like breathed in near an AWS bill knows that that bill goes up and down depending on what you're using. That's not capital expenditure. That's variable expenditure. So you are definitely trading, investing in hardware, which is like capital outlay, against operational outlay, basically variable expense. So we know that that last one's not true. We know the third one's not true. Now, and then the first one, are we trying to achieve lower economies of scale? So even by process of elimination, we could probably just say, yeah, I mean, that's like DevOpsy right there. We want increased speed and agility. We throw quality in there and we've got DevOps really somewhere, right? Or at least some variation of Agile. So if we check this, and I see that some posted that as well, right? 2 and 4 makes sense. They do give you gimmies like this where it's like, hey, you get discounts off of your favorite children's clothing store. It's like, okay, great. Any questions about that one? There's 6, by the way. There's like trade capital expense for variable, trade speed and agility, you know, foster innovation, stop running data centers, stop guessing capacity. You know, there's a whole list. Oh, here it is. Benefit from massive economies of scale. Like there's like 6 that they always talk about. Stop spending money on data centers, go global in minutes, stop guessing capacity. These are the same 6 that show up in all the classes. So, okay. By the way, you were one of the first companies I talked to that actually used the brand new type of load balancer, which I was actually, that was pretty fun actually to know that somebody was actually using it. So which type of elastic load balancer allows you to forward the incoming request to a target group with a Lambda function, which is serverless, by the way, has a target? By the way, there's only one. There's only one of these load balancers that will actually allow you to forward to a serverless backend. And, you know, it's not the classic load balancer. No one should be using that one. The network load balancer actually does what it's labeled. It only really operates at the network layer. If you're forwarding to a Lambda, you're probably doing layer 7 stuff, which is application layer, which is an application load balancer. So in this case, you just have to know that the network load balancer is this really simple device. All it does is IP addresses and ports. It can't do fancy routing. It has practically no features to it other than it can handle a couple 100,000 connections a second, which is, you know, a feature in and of itself. The application load balancer is the one that has all the pathing and the routing and all the other crazy features. But the one thing I will tell you is the network load balancer can actually get a static IP address. You can't get that with the application load balancer. My point being is that if we start talking about high-level services and integrations and all these fancy features, it's the application load balancer every time. just so you know. If it's a fast 100,000s of connection static IP address question, it's going to be a network load balancer. Amazon is not going to make classic load balancer the right answer for anything because they're retiring it. And soon, by the way, you'll see a gateway load balancer, which is the one that I was referring to that I knew you guys were using, which I thought was pretty cool, actually. I noticed, by the way, I saw all the 4s, so that's good. Oh, look at that. They added the gateway load balancer. The gateway load balancer, by the way, is really kind of like an security. It's not really a load balancer. Anyway, that's a whole discussion. We'll just move past that. We'll do that for some other time. Okay. What's the best way to keep track of all activities made in your AWS account? I gotta tell you, that question could probably use some better wording. Let's clarify that. What's the best way to track all API calls made in your AWS account? If you want to track all of the API calls made against your account, there's really only one service that you're going to track. There it is. CloudTrail is the service. I don't think there is even a such thing as MFA logging. Could be wrong. CloudWatch logs to log all activities. CloudWatch is for metrics about resources inside your system, inside your account, not really about the account itself. And then using LDAP authentication is a great way to extend authentication for AWS, but it's not really going to give you like monitoring activities. Really, CloudTrail is built for that. CloudTrail is meant to watch everything that comes into your account from an API perspective. So, and I see that. You guys all thought the same. Okay. This question is super tricky because it really like splits hairs on a very like specific detail. What's the minimum support plan that provides you access to all of the trusted advisor checks? Well, let's just say this. Basic isn't going to get you anything because Basic doesn't pay anything. Developer is what, like $100 plus or a percent, like 1% of spend or something weird like that. So it's probably going to be the one that you see chock full of features, one of the top 2 like support plans. So even if you didn't know, right? What's the minimum? It's definitely going to be business, because this would be overkill, wouldn't it? I better be getting more than just trusted advisor checks if I'm going to spend, 17% of my monthly spend with AWS. By the way, that's not how much it costs. I'm just overstating. So where is trusted advisor? So see this trusted advisor line right here. So with the developer, you get 7 core checks. Notice that Basic gets nothing. Starting with business, you get the full set of checks with trusted advisor. So, it will behoove you to kind of memorize this to a certain degree, or at least note the differences, the breakpoints. So checking to see if there's questions. Looks like we're good. Okay. Question number 18. By the way, we only have 10 minutes left. It's been good. Blank is an online software store that helps customers find, buy, and immediately start using the software and services that run on AWS. By the way, that does actually, like, I remember a question very much like this being on the Cloud Practitioner when I took it actually like 6 months ago. The wording on that's really funny, but there's really only one answer, actually. It's definitely not Amazon.com, right? And IQ, I don't even know if IQ is actually a real thing. Probably is. The reserved instance marketplace is where you go to sell your reservations if you no longer need them to other customers of AWS. So if you want to get third-party license stuff like checkpoint firewalls, Fortinet, F5, TIBCO, that kind of thing, the marketplace is where you could go to grab that. So it looks like you all agree based on what I'm seeing in chat. Note that these are qualified partners, so not any just random Joe can go out there. They have to do some business provings to make that work. Let's see. Oh, that's right. IQ is the one that enables customers to basically, oh, that's right, because I got invited to that, actually. I should have remembered that. you basically can talk to certified third-party experts to answer questions, and they pay the expert for it, right? So that's what AWS IQ is. Okay. This is about knowing the services. Which service is best used for data analytics and data warehousing? There really is only one clear answer here. Redshift is the data warehousing service. It's been the data warehousing service for a long time. Just to say this, S3 probably is a better like data warehouse, data lake, data repository, but when it comes to actually data analytics and data warehousing, Redshift is the bomb, right? So, because remember, S3 is just a repository. It actually can't do any kind of analytics or anything. Notice that they were very clear that analytics needs to be part of the play. And there are tools that will read S3 to do data analytics, but the only one that's here, right, that does data warehousing and data analytics together is Redshift. Now, just a question. If I needed Amazon's primary flagship NoSQL database, which of those numbers would that be? What's their flagship NoSQL data service, data store, right? Yeah, so that would be 3. And then if I wanted to get a serverless, like RDBMS, like a serverless version of Postgres and MySQL, right? Which number would that be? That would be 4, right? Aurora is a subset of the relational database service. Aurora is the only thing that has a serverless aspect to it in that whole service. So it's the serverless database, and we know what S3 is. It's a file repository basically. Okay, let's check it because maybe I'm completely wrong. Anyone, by the way, just fun, silly fact, does anyone know what Redshift is actually based off of? Because almost all their database technologies are based on open source analogs. Does anyone know what Redshift is based on by chance? Anyone ever logged in, used the ODBC driver? Yeah, it's based on Postgres 8.1 actually. So yeah, sounds like a submarine. Okay. The use of multi-threading in your Amazon S3 request via the multi-part upload API is an example of which AWS cloud best practice. Now I have to tell you, I don't remember this being anywhere in Cloud Practitioner. Does anybody else remember that? Is that one of the sections? I don't either. Sometimes, by the way, Amazon, and so I think John replicates this well, they will throw in questions that are throwaways, right? They don't count towards your score and they just want to see how you do with it. Not because they're evaluating you, because they want to see how the question does with that particular audience. So multi-threading, basically via the multi-part upload, it allows you to take a file that's over 100 megs and break it into pieces and upload them separately. What happens is that when Amazon receives, let's say you break it into 5 pieces, it'll upload all 5 pieces separately. When it receives all 5 pieces on the S3 side of the service, it assembles them together and then presents them out as if you uploaded them to S3. Let's say you have 5 pieces and number 5 refuses to upload. Amazon will actually keep the parts 4, 3, 2, and 1 until you get that 5th part up there, or you go up there and delete the multi-parts, right? So the reason this is done is because what they're trying to do is to basically get you to parallelize your work. They would rather you run a job that takes 8 hours across 8 servers for an hour than to take one server and run it for 8 hours. They want you to think about parallelizing your stuff. They want you to go for concurrency. So it could be something else, right? But it's most likely it's think parallel. Oh, look, and I thought that was a word I'd made up, but apparently parallelization is a real thing. So good. All right, let's do one more and then I'll check in with everybody. I'm hoping that this was very useful. Which of the following is a serverless compute service of AWS? Let's be clear. They're being very specific here. Don't get confused with my earlier question. I was talking about a serverless database service. They're talking about a serverless compute service. So which here is the serverless compute service? Good. Yeah, I think since your flagship, one of your flagship projects uses Lambda pretty heavily, if I remember correctly. So hopefully you at least have all heard about it, seems like, if not used it directly. So remember, DynamoDB is a NoSQL database service. Aurora is a subset of RDS, so a relational database. And then Athena is one of those services that actually can hook into structured S3 data, and you can actually run SQL queries against it. Athena is actually pretty cool. S3 is not super fast, so this is not a lightning fast service, right? But that's it. Lambda is the serverless compute service, right? Inside of AWS. Okay, that was so quick. Let's just do one more. Keep going. Which service in AWS allows you to host your own Puppet Enterprise infrastructure? You can also host your own Chef Enterprise infrastructure. There's only one. And this service has actually been around for a while, and they keep adding like Puppet and Chef and other things to it. I'm just waiting for them to add Ansible to it. So just to say this is that OpsWorks is the service that allows you to do server configuration management, which is really what Chef and Puppet do. They also have their own version that's AWS proprietary. CloudFormation is infrastructure as code templates for creating objects inside of AWS. Like if you want to provision infrastructure, like you want to create an S3 bucket with a file, you want to create an S3 bucket in an EC2 instance with a file, CloudFormation can provide the file and it actually will create it for you. Service Catalog allows you to have a vending machine for services inside of your account. If I remember correctly, you are using Landing Zone, which allows you to actually use Service Catalog to vend accounts out to people. And then Elastic Beanstalk is a wizard for EC2. It allows you to deploy applications using a wizard. You just give it the code and it handles everything else for you. Yeah, I gotta tell you, Jenna, that one also, I was like, huh. More like a Harry Potter wizard, Nick, not a Gandalf wizard, you know. Or, you know, maybe Gandalf the White, not Gandalf the Gray. So, all right, so that's the last question we're gonna cover. It's 5:58. Does anyone have any hangups, any questions about anything here, any challenges or any curiosities that you want to share before we close out?
So I actually took this particular test today, which is why I remembered some of the answers. But there was one that came up that was about SSD versus HDD on EBS volumes. And that one confused me because I didn't remember seeing anything about storage. It was somewhere in here, obviously. But that one confused me and I wasn't sure about that one.
Yeah, so EBS has two family types of storage. One is SSD based, right? And the other is mechanical based. A lot of the characteristics are the same about the drives, but the SSD based are IO focused and the HDD based are really kind of like archival and kind of streaming focused, if you will. SSDs are the only ones that can be boot volumes. So you have to like boot up a system with an SSD and then add an HDD to it. So just know that like there are different classes of storage in those two families as well. But the SSDs are super fast. As a matter of fact, Amazon just released one that's like ridiculously fast, way faster than even a lot of SANs that I know about. But that's what they mean is that one is solid state, one's mechanical, and the solid states are IO focused, the mechanicals are archival and streaming focused. But I'd be shocked that they went to that level of detail.
That in the material?
It should have been under like the Elastic Block Store since it belongs to that service. And it might have been under EC2, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's go back.
But do note that that's probably the reason why we offer the practice exams is that there's going to be material that isn't necessarily covered. Because just so you know, the Cloud Practitioner class has a little bit more material in it than the digital training. So that's why we give you the practice exams, because that's going to fill in all the gaps. Because now you're like, hey, I didn't know anything about hard drives. Hopefully there was a link there in John's answer. So you might want to like brush up on that just a little bit, right? That's why we do this, is to make sure it covers everything.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So if you like, hey, I don't remember this in the thing, it might not be in there, but that's why we do it. The digital training doesn't cover the same breadth of material that the actual instructor-led class does. They actually have slightly different agendas, but that's what this is here for, to let you know.
Cool.
Good. Anything else? Any other comments, questions, curiosities?
Nope.
Okay. Post this video probably by 8 a.m. in the morning. Tell your friends, especially since Monday I was like stuck in traffic in the side of a car. So have a great weekend, and I will be there on Monday. But this video, you'll see it in the morning by 8 a.m. if not sooner. Okay. Have a good
Thank
one,
you.
everyone. All right. Let us know if you need any help. Otherwise, we'll see you next week.
Thanks. Bye.